Welcome to the Dice Tower, a series of video reviews about board and card games. Here are your hosts.
Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Z Garcia.
I'm Roy Kennedy.
I'm Mike Felicio.
And today we're taking a look at Ankh, Gods of Egypt. So Ankh is the third game in a trilogy from Eric Lang and Simon after Blood Rage and Rising Sun. This is not us making that up. They basically said that.
For sure.
It's about you being a god in Egypt and trying to get followers and having people remember you as time has gone by. I'm really interested here because we don't often do this, but we've all been very coy with each other
We have.
as to our final opinions on this game. I'm pretty sure I have a sense of where everybody's at, but not exactly. There's a lot of stuff that came in the Kickstarter. We're looking at the base set, although you will see the upgraded pieces. There's no way around that. We played with them. We're not going to not play with them just because they...
Sure.
Yeah. But, Mike, tell us how the game works. Quickly.
Sounds good.
Okay, here we see an example setup for a two-player game of Ankh. And I say example setup because there are many different ways that the game can be set up. Included within the game is this book of scenarios. And these aren't scenarios in the sense that you may be familiar with, like this is not a campaign game. But what these do is give you different ways to set up this main board. One thing I do want to point out is that you are looking at the optional playmat here. This does not come standard with the game. This was an add-on during the Kickstarter campaign. But it is essentially the same, at least in layout, as the cardboard map that comes with the game. And it just kind of incorporates what would be sideboards all into one mat here. All right, just makes it easier to show on camera, and it's a bit larger to show these things off. In this book of scenarios, there are multiple different ways to set the game up. Sometimes they include special rules. So, for example, this great rebuilding here is a setup for 3 to 5 players, and there are multiple different setups depending on player count, and they have some special rules. The one that you're seeing here is the Great Flood, which is the recommended first scenario for 2 players. And what's nice about this is that the only additional rules to it is that this whole upper area of the board, this region, the delta, is inaccessible, which makes for a nice tighter 2-player game and easier for a first introduction. So as the game board is originally set up, at the beginning of the game you have 3 regions normally, but in this one that top delta region is inaccessible throughout this game. You could play with the whole board with 2 players, so for example this Old Kingdom if you wanted to, but it's just going to be a little bit more open to begin with because you've got the whole board to work with. Alright, so once you've decided how you're going to set the game up, we can kind of look at what figures are starting here on the board. These 2 large figures that you see represent the 2 gods in the game, and in this example we've got Osiris right here, and we've got Ra right here. We also have 2 of their warriors that are out there on the board as well that they start. You see a number of monuments, which are these plastic figures. That is also something to point out. Some of these components that you're seeing are part of the upgraded stretch goals that come in the Kickstarter campaign. In the retail version of the game, you will have cardboard tokens instead of these plastic figures to represent the different monuments. You see 2 of them that actually have these little Ankh tokens in them, all right? And that represents that they are controlled by the associated god. So this temple here is controlled by Osiris. This temple is controlled by Ra. You also see obelisks and pyramids that don't have any tokens. Those are considered to be neutral monuments. All right, so to play the game, you're going to be taking generally 2 actions. Every so often you'll take 1, but generally 2, and it's from this list of 4 different actions. You'll either be moving figures, summoning figures, gaining followers, or unlocking Ankh powers. All right? And so I'll just go through these briefly. Again, this is going to be a high-level overview. I'm not going to go into too deep of a rules teach. All right, when you want to move figures, what you're going to do is you are going to look at this associated track and move it 1 to the right. Right now, this is set up at the beginning spot for a 2-player game. In a 3-player game, they would be further to the left. 4 and 5, they'd be all the way over to the left. The only restriction when it comes to taking actions is that for your second action, it has to be further down this track than the one you took before, and you cannot take the same action twice. So for example, if you take summon figures as your first action, you can't then move the figures that you summoned. because it is higher up on the track. You would have to take either gain followers or unlock Ankh power as your second action. It also means that if you take unlock Ankh power as your first action, you'll only take one action. There might be times when you'd want to do that if it was very important for you to do that particular power. Action, I should say. All right, so let's just say, for example, that Osiris here goes first. They're going to move figures. When you move figures, you can choose any of the figures on the board and move them up to 3 spaces. You can go over water, you can go over monuments, you can go through other players, you can go through your own players. You just have to end on an empty hex. You cannot share hexes with other figures. Also, you cannot end on water spaces unless you are a god that specifically allows you to do so, or you've gained access to a guardian that can do that. Generally speaking, you cannot end on water. So let's say that Osiris here is going to move, and they say, all right, I'm going to move 1, 2, 3. I'll move 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to leave that one where it is. You could stop before moving 3. You can move 1 or 2 or none. All right, so that was my first action. Now I have access to all 3 of the other actions because I moved first. Now let's say, for example, I want to summon a figure. All right, I look at my pool. Right now I have 4 available warriors to me here in my supply. I can place one of these figures adjacent to any of my figures on the map or a monument that I control. So I can place them in any one of these spaces. I can place it in these, here, or I can place it adjacent to this monument I control. So let's say I put it right there. Those are my 2 actions. Okay, so let's say that Ra is going to take the other 2 actions just so we can show those off. So Ra is going to gain followers, all right? So they would move that along. And when you gain followers, what you're going to do is you are going to gain a follower, which are represented by these plastic, in this version, the plastic tokens. These are, again, the upgraded. They'd be cardboard in the retail version. You're going to gain a follower for every monument that your figure is next to that is either owned by you, or controlled by you, or neutral. So in this case, they're going to gain 2 followers because they are next to that monument that they control, and they are next to this neutral monument right here. So they would take 2 of these followers and put them in their pool. Every player starts with 1. And then the final action that you can do is you can unlock an Ankh power. And to do that, you're going to look at your god dashboard here. And I'm going to kind of try to show this here with the tokens still on it as best as I can. They're kind of sliding around a little bit. But these are basically different abilities that you can gain access to. And you have to unlock them from left to right, paying the associated amount of followers. Okay, so the first 2 that you unlock will be 1, then 2, then 3. So if, actually it wouldn't be Osiris, it would be Ra that's going to be unlocking this god power, Ankh power. So let's say that they paid their follower and they say, okay, I'm going to get revered. So now for the rest of the game, whenever I gain followers, I get an extra one. These dashboards are the same for all of the gods, with the exception of their special power, which is right here, which in the case of Ra is Radiance. I'll go over the special power of these all towards the end of the video. The other thing that happens when you unlock certain spots on your dashboard, you'll always only be picking 2 for each column maximum. You see the scarab symbol. What that means is that now you have access to one of these guardians. In a 2-player game, there's only 1 for each level 1, 2, and 3. There are a number of different guardians that you have potentially that you can put into a game. But for the example we have here, we've got Serket as our level 1, Mummy as our level 2, and Taweret as our level 3. So Ra, if they were the first one, they would take this figure that represents Serket, they would put one of their bases on it like so, and they would have access to it in their pool. Okay, so you're taking these 4 actions back and forth. One of the things that's going to happen is at the end of each of these tracks, you see a white colored circle there. And whenever one of those gets entered, you're going to trigger an event. And there are 3 different types of events that can happen. All right? So let's say, for example, that on Osiris's next turn, they go ahead and they summon a figure. So they'll bring one of these right out here. And now they want to unlock an Ankh power, which bumps it into the white spot there. So they pay their 1, they unlock one of these powers. They now are going to trigger an event. There are 3 types. These events here are claiming a monument. And so what you can do is, if you are the person to trigger that, you can choose a neutral monument at the beginning of the game that is next to one of your figures, and you can claim it. So in this case, I could claim either this pyramid because I am adjacent to it here, or this obelisk because both of these figures are adjacent to it. One thing I should point out is that these rivers break adjacency. So this is not adjacent to this. Okay? So claiming monuments, that's one way you can, that's one of the events. The other event, I'm going to skip that battle, is for camels. This is a way to split regions into sub-regions. So you can choose up to 6 camels. Let's see here, I've got 3, I've got 6. Now I do. If you are taking this camel action, what you're going to do is split one region into 2. The rules are they have to be connected from the edge of the board, or water, or a river, or other camels, and you cannot create a region that is less than 6 hexes. So let's say, for example, I wanted to take this whole big region 1 here and split it into 2. You put them in between the lines. So right here, only 3. Okay, so now this is one region and this is another region. You take the next largest number, which in this case is 3, and you pop it there. Now let's say for one reason or another you want to switch up the order of these, because these are going to be determining in what order battles are taken. So let's say, all right, yeah, I want to make this 1, and if I wanted to, I could even switch this with 2. But let's say I keep it like this. All right. The third event that will trigger are battles. So whoever actually, and if once you have triggered the event, you move back to the beginning of your space there. But when battles are triggered, what you're going to do is you are going to resolve in order, numerical order from low to high, battles in each region. Okay? And so how that's going to work is you are going to be playing these battle cards. Every god has an identical 7-card deck of battle cards. All right, so you always know what the other players potentially have. Okay, you go region by region. Each figure has a base strength of 1. There are different powers that can change that can make them more powerful, but generally speaking, each figure has a base of 1, and that includes the guardians. Okay, so even if this figure was out here, that's still a base of 1, but it's going to have a particular power. In this case, Serket says if you win a battle with Serket, you may move her to any empty non-water space in a region higher in the conflict order if available. So let's say, for example, that with Serket here, if Ra wins this battle, they could move Serket to 3 because it's higher in the order. All right, so that's a nice little power there. These cards are going to do a couple of different things. They are going to potentially add strength to the battle. Many of them don't add any strength. Chariots here adds 3 strength, but nothing else. That's just for pictorial. It doesn't mean anything. Most of them have different abilities, okay? So, for example, this allows you to build a monument in the region that you're in if you sacrifice 3 followers, although there is a power to make this free. You can have a drought, which increases the devotion, which are points, reward for winning a battle for each of your figures in the yellow regions of the board. Miracle allows you to gain points for losing figures in a battle. I'm going to say Plague of Locusts. Chariots gives you 3 strength. Flood is going to give you followers for each of your figures in fertile region, that those figures cannot be killed during battle resolution. I'll save that actually for the very last. Plague of Locusts is a way to bid followers that you have. Maybe you've got 5, 6 followers. Everybody who's involved in the battle is going to secretly bid a number of these followers, and whoever reveals the most is going to kill all the figures except for their own. Okay, so kill all figures except for those of the player who sacrificed the most followers. One thing that's very important to note, though, is that gods, although they are technically figures, will never be killed. They will never be removed from the board. They're always going to be out there. Okay, as you play these cards, they are no longer accessible to you until you play the Cycle of Mott card, which adds 0 strength, but it allows you at the end of the battle to reclaim all of the cards that you've played in previous battles. Okay? The person who started the whole conflict by triggering the event is going to gain this token, and that's going to allow them to break ties if there are any. All right? So generally speaking, you're going to be playing a card simultaneously. You play it face down, you flip it over, and you're going to evaluate who wins. All right? There is an order to this, though, and it's revealed on the back of your player aid card. So you simultaneously select cards. If anyone played the Build Monument card, they're going to do that first, and there's a reason why I'll show you in a moment. Then, if anyone played that Plague of Locust cards I showed you, you resolve that. Then you're going to be doing monument majorities. So, for example, in this region, let's say that we did not play Locust, and these are the region. This is the figures we have in here right now. Right now, Osiris has a majority of obelisks because nobody else has any obelisks in the region. So Osiris would get 1 point for having that. If Osiris also had this pyramid, they would gain 2 points because they have majority in both pyramids and obelisks. All right? So you'd gain devotion points based on the majorities you have in that particular region. Then you do battle resolution, where you compare strength. And let's say, for example, that Osiris had won this battle, Ra had lost both of their figures. Osiris would get another point for winning the battle. There is another type of battle that can happen. Let's say, for example, 3, although we would go to 2 next, but let's look at 3 for a moment. Right now you can see that Osiris is the only god that has any figures in this region. So that would constitute a domination. What that means is that you would still gain any points for monument majorities, in this case 1, and you would get a point even though no battle takes place for dominating the region. All right? So that is generally speaking how battle works. You go through each region, and more regions will happen as the game goes on because you put out more camels that are going to split into more regions. That means more places that you are going to be potentially fighting. Okay? You're going to keep going, playing out your actions, usually 2 per turn. There are multiple ways that the game can end. All right? This is the devotion track, which is basically the victory points for the game. As you move up this track, if anyone reaches this blue area, this white and the blue area, you have red and blue. If anyone reaches that, the game ends immediately with the god who ended there. They win the game. The other thing that could happen is you could be moving down here, and as you get to this second to last battle, at the end of resolving all of the battles, any gods that are in the red area here will be eliminated from the game. So, for example, if we have this situation and you get to the end of that battle resolution, if both gods are in the red, nobody wins. It's very unlikely, especially in a 2-player game, but it could theoretically happen. But if this were the case, then Osiris would win because they're in blue and Ra here is in red. Okay? Now, in a 2-player game, you do not have something known as a merge. And I'm not going to go into a tremendous amount of detail here because I'm sure this is going to be talked about a fair bit in the actual review of the game. But in a game with 3 or more players, the 2 players in the 2 lowest positions, so let's say that these 2 gods were like here, and the other 2 gods were higher up, these 2 gods would merge, and they would kind of become a shared merged god. And this is a situation where the person in the lowest place would remove all of their monuments from the board, all of their figures from the board, and they would share powers with the next player, the next god up. In this case, they would move down to where the lowest player was, and now they shared powers. And like I said, the god would remove their figures and their monuments. They can only take 1 action at a time at that point. And they are kind of working together to try to survive and even potentially win the game. All right, I'm going to take a pause here. I'm going to grab the other god dashboards because I want to just quickly show you the different powers that the gods can have. Okay, so let's take a look at the god dashboards. I'm going to show you the 5 that come with the base game here. And then there are 2 that come with the Tomb of Wonders, which is the stretch goal box. There are also some other guardians that come with that, but we're not going to go over all those. There are a whole number of those. All right, so Isis here, Queen of the Throne, has the Protectress power. Each of your figures adjacent to an enemy figure is considered protected. Protected figures can't be killed during battle resolution unless you allow it. And so you might allow it if you were playing a miracle card that gives you points for losing figures, but generally speaking, this allows you to keep your figures on the board if you put them next to enemies. Then you've got Amun, who's got the Hidden, and this has an extra little token that comes with it. Once during each conflict event, you may play 2 battle cards in a single battle, resolve both, adding their strength bonuses together, but you do have to let your opponents know before they choose their choices that you're playing 2. Now, this is 1 per conflict event. That means every single region gets played out. You can only do it once. So you couldn't do it here, and then there, and then there. You can only do it once per total conflict event. Then we've got Anubis, the Embalmer here, who is the Judge of the Dead. Whenever enemy warriors are killed, you can put one in one of these spaces. And for every one, your god has +1 strength. So you can have a strength of up to 4 if this is filled with enemy warriors. And if opponents want to get these back from you to make you weaker and to get their units back, they have to pay you a follower. Then we've got Ra, the Sun and the Light here, who has a Radiance ability, which has these extra tokens that you would place there. You have 3 of them. Whenever you summon a figure onto the board, you can place one of those Sun tokens on it. It becomes a Radiant at that point, and you gain an extra devotion if you win a battle in a region with at least 1 of your Radiant figures. Here we've got Osiris, the god of the dead. If you lose a battle, you can place or move 1 underworld token into any empty non-water space in that region. Monuments and enemy figures cannot occupy an underworld space. And when you use the summon figures action, you may summon 1 extra figure in any underworld space. So I placed one right here. Let's say that I'd lost in this region, or if Osiris had lost in this region, then when you take a summon figures, you could choose to put one of your figures out there. It also kind of blocks anybody else from placing figures in that region or for placing monuments in that region. These last 2 are the ones that come from the Tomb of Wonders. Ptah, or Ta, I think the P is probably silent, Creator Builder. After any opponent builds a monument, they must give you a follower if possible. After you build a monument, gain all Exalted Follower tokens from here. Exalted Followers count as 2 followers for all purposes. When sacrificed, they return here. And then you've got Sobek, the Crocodile God. You remember how in the overview I said that generally speaking, players cannot move into water spaces. Well, Sobek is a crocodile. Your god may occupy water spaces, and they count as part of each region that they are adjacent to. If you dominate or win a battle with your god, you can place a water token in the region in any space adjacent to a river, water space, camel, or external border, permanently changing it to a water space. You cannot split a region with this ability. So with Sobek, you could basically spread water along the board that only you can end in those spaces, and they make you adjacent potentially to a number of different regions. All right, well, there are other gods that are available in different expansions that we are not talking about here, but allow you to do a lot of different things. Also, these gods all come with little merged god kind of player aid. So if you merged with Sobek, you would have not only your power, but Sobek's power as well. And it kind of tells you in the back what happens when gods merge. All right, so again, a high-level overview. There's a lot going on in this game, but this should give you the basics. Let's head back over and we'll all tell you what we think about Ankh.
That wasn't quick.
No.
All right, so before we get into some of the mechanisms of the game, the production of this game, I think we all agree, is pretty awesome. I think these are some of my favorite miniatures I've ever seen.
And these miniatures are great. I really like the way they look. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that I do want to point out is that they did an interesting thing. Like sometimes you have these miniatures that kind of have like bendy staves or bendy swords and things like that. They actually made like hard plastic for some of the different pieces. And I think that's the first time I've seen CMON do that ever.
Mixture of 2 different types of plastics in one.
Mixture of 2 different type of plastics, like softer plastic that you normally get on these CMON miniatures, and then like hard plastic that they have for like the different weapons and things like that. So as a miniature painter or like somebody who's really into miniatures, I was like, oh, that's an interesting touch.
And you mentioned painters, but you and I think, we're talking about how I don't know that I'm actually even looking to get this painted, because I do like just
doing a little, but for the most part, I like that the big models are so big, and they're different colors,
and they're nice colors.
Very striking colors, very lovely colors. Yes. I will say we did play with the upgraded monuments.
We did.
They are cardboard punch-outs.
Yes.
And they will just sit flat on the board and kind of get swallowed by the enormous, very imposing miniatures.
Right.
That is something to point out. If you buy this retail, and I don't know how many people are actually doing that, but we'll mention it. The monuments are just little cardboard things flat on the board. You put your little token, slot it into them, flat on the board, and that's yours now. You will have to do a little bit of the old, it's in there. There's a pyramid down there among all these things.
Yeah.
So
this is one example, I think you're right, where the upgraded components probably actually help with usability.
Oh, for sure.
Whereas a lot of times that's not always the case. It's just a graphic, or an aesthetic upgrade. This actually, I think, does help with the usability to have
really,
those.
I just cannot imagine playing without them.
Right.
Now, there's several mechanisms in the game that we'll talk about. The first one is the very beginning. So you're picking one or two actions, which could cause, what's the word for it when you move?
You trigger an event.
Trigger an event. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you seen that in a game before, something like that? And what did you think of that aspect of the game?
I thought it was definitely very interesting and added a lot of angst of okay, do I want to take two actions? Do I want to trigger the event? Because the events can be really important, but then the faster you're triggering events, the more you're going to be triggering a combat that's going to happen, or somebody else could trigger a combat that's going to happen. It's are you ready for that? Is that ready to happen? There's a lot of interesting things and a lot of interesting choices to make, and sometimes you might be do I make a less good choice on the action I'm doing so that I can trigger this thing? There's a lot of important things there, and I felt a lot of, I guess, good anxiety about that, because what's the decision? Those choices were very interesting to me.
They also feel like they put them in a very specific order,
clearly.
move being first, and I'm can't move be the last.
Right, yeah, the idea.
Absolutely, yeah. And I do like that. I do like the idea of the rhythm of triggering the big events, the passage of time, if you would. I like that very much. It comes up quickly. You do have to debate if you want to command that, to be the one that makes that decision.
Right.
They are not something you ignore in this game.
Oh, for sure.
You need to get some of those. No matter what else you're doing, you need to make some choices that are going to give you monuments. You need to make, if you are having a problem area, you want to try to be the one that gets the camels and split that up. And that cascades. But I like that when you bubble it up to the top, mechanically, it's very simple. Move with very few hiccups to move. Move anywhere. 3 spaces.
Right.
Yep.
Through water? Yeah. Through other monsters? Yeah.
Sure.
Just move. 3. End up somewhere empty. That's it. Summon. 1 next to something with your color. Great.
Yeah.
I mean, I like that they're so basic.
It's so funny. I kind of wish I had cut you off because you said literally exactly what I was going to say, in that the core actions are so simple that it helps to have that turn angst to do that. And also, I'm going to echo, every one of those events are equally important. And that is something I did not catch on to in my first game.
For sure.
All of them. Claiming a monument. Super important.
Yes.
Being the one to subdivide and then potentially change the order of the combat. Super important.
Yes.
Even triggering combat is important because you get a potential tiebreaker in combat, or at least once for that combat round. So it kind of intensifies that angst of, sometimes it's just better to take one action and trigger that event.
Absolutely.
So-
I think early game you'll feel man, I'm wasting something.
Right.
No,
You're not
your second
necessarily.
action is claiming a monument.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not nothing. That's
No,
huge.
it's huge.
It's not even one of the 4 choices.
Right.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like the way that works.
I also think that all 4 of the actions that you can take are all equally important as well. You want to move around, you want to get more people out, you want to get more followers. Followers are really important. You want to be upgrading and doing the Ankh stuff so you can get special abilities. And if you don't race the other players you're not going to get the monsters. There's a lot of really interesting and intriguing choices on what you're going to do on those boards and those actions.
Yeah.
And the choices make the game move pretty quickly. Go, 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 go,
Yes.
go. And then the game stops
For combat.
And so that's the next thing I want to talk about, because that is, I would say, almost half the game, if not more. Combat is
yeah,
a
for sure.
long process in game.
Sure.
I don't think it's a long game.
No.
It's a long process in game because it's the most important part of the game. And this uses card combat, which we've seen in many games before. And in this one in particular, you all have this exact same hand of cards.
Yes.
You know what card's been played. You know what cards somebody has. You see what special abilities. So the randomness is trying to big convoluted rock, paper, scissors. Not convoluted.
Sure, in some
It's
ways.
a-
It's just a little more advanced version of it.
Yeah, there's bluffing and not bluffing, but sort of trying to get in other people's heads.
Yeah.
What might they do? What could they do here to cancel anything I might think of doing? If they're going to play this and kill all my figures by outbidding me, I need to make sure I'm scoring for figures that died. If they don't do that, I'm wasting the card. And I love the mechanism of cards you play stay out until you play a card that does nothing but reset you. Again, clean, but I like it. Yet another pressure point.
It's also
I love the card combat. I really enjoy card combat in games, and just the psychological thing of outthinking your opponent is always fun for me. I've enjoyed this in other games that have had it as well, and I think there's a lot of interesting choices in this one as well that's very unique. Like the whole plague thing is huge, and if you see somebody bottom out on followers, it's like, I can plague them and win.
Right.
You know, and you know that going in, but then it's like, okay, well, there's other decisions, like you can play cards that let you kill off all your guys, or if they get killed off, you get a bunch of points, and other ones that let you gain followers. There's lots of interesting choices. And building monuments inside of combat is a big deal, because monuments are one of the main ways you make points during the game. There's really big decisions that are all wrapped up in this combat that also gives you a lot of like anxiety, like good anxiety of like, what do I do? Where do I play? Can I outsmart them? And being able to figure out the right card to play at the right time and what your opponent's already played and what you might play is a huge part of this game, and it's one that I really enjoy.
And you also have to take into account what I think you were getting ready to say is that just because it's deterministic doesn't mean that you necessarily can say like, well, look, they have to play this card, because most times what that means is that this is one combat out of maybe 3 or 4, and they might be in all of those. So you're like,
you
okay,
gotta look ahead,
I know that they're going to play a plague card, but are they going to play it now, or are they going to play it in another, combat later in the round?
Right.
And so,
which fight is most important to them?
Right, and I also appreciate what you said, Tom, which is this idea that everyone has the exact same hand of cards, and we've got the same Ankh powers too.
Right.
And so it's like you could get, is a type of system that if there were too many things that were different from each other, you could get bogged down in analysis paralysis.
Sure.
I don't. Combat feels, even though it takes a little time, it feels relatively snappy. Relatively.
Well, I'm interested in every combat, whether I'm in it or not.
Right, exactly.
Because I want to know what's going on.
Sure.
And there only is so many combats.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And I also love when someone burns a card that I was afraid they were going to use on me in a later combat in an earlier one. I'm like, oh, I'm not in this one, but they played their plague, so now I don't have to worry about that.
But that being said, you said there's not a lot of different stuff. The thing that is different, not counting the monsters, is the god power.
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
Now, this is a big part of the game. In the original set, there's 5 gods or 6?
5 in the base
5.
box, 2 with that kind of tomb.
So
of
we've
one
played a
base.
little bit beyond the base set, but I know the base set ones. What did you think about that? Do you think they're? I think they're pretty big powers. They make me feel very different than other people. They're not like a 16 rules. It's like one rule. Hey, like one god. You play 2 cards instead of 1.
Right.
And in one battle.
One time in that
And
fight,
yet it feels that threat being there makes the whole battle. It affects the whole battle, even though it only affects one thing
In the whole
in one combat. The whole battle, I'm sitting there. Are you playing 2 cards now? Well, can you play 2 cards when you fight Mike? He's more dangerous than me.
Right. Yeah.
I like the powers. I think some might feel a little less sort of underwhelming, or more underwhelming, I should say, or a little less fun, and are more sort of procedural, and you make more points by doing this. Is it fun? Is it exciting? No, but
Maybe
you
not
need
as
to
much.
do it and
Yeah.
make points. Also, some feel a little bit weaker with fewer players. Like there's the god that can bank your dying characters.
Yeah.
And you get a +1 per god.
Per god, right.
If you're playing against one other person, you need to be the one beating them to take it.
Right.
That god feels a little under the curve.
Yeah,
when you're playing with only 2.
I would maybe not use that god in a 2-player game.
Yeah, but I mean that's something to if you pick randomly. You know, I don't know if it's not balanced. I haven't played nearly the hundreds of times that the game's been played to be play tested. But it does feel a little underwhelming. I like them generally. I like that one big power, but I definitely like some more than others.
Sure.
I definitely think certain players are going to gravitate towards certain like gods for different play styles. Like, oh man, I really like to be combat. I'm going to pick that one, or oh, I really want to do this or that. And they'll be able to have different ones that they really enjoy in different ways. Like I played as Raw, and it's like, oh man, my ability triggers when I win combat. So I'm like getting in these combats that I know I can win, and I wasn't spreading myself out and giving myself an opportunity to lose. I was clumping up and being like, okay, I'm going to win where I'm at, so I can trigger these abilities. So it's very interesting, like figuring out how to utilize those god powers properly. And there's a big, wide range of them throughout the game.
All right.
There's 5.
Well,
Actually, I'll disagree with that.
More,
and I will say, I'll fold into that I find the monsters, the Guardians in this game, they are also a smaller part of the whole picture than maybe what I would have liked. You know, you have 3, you use 3. It's one of those things where, like, the returns, especially if you back this on Kickstarter, you have 82 of these things. I'm exaggerating, but you're using 3. There's not that, like, they are a smaller part of the game than the previous games in this line. Is what I'm
Even
saying.
smaller than that, because this is one of my negatives about the game.
I was going to say
well, you know, because I said it the whole game. I love monsters.
Yes.
But it's possible I won't get one.
Right.
Even if I'm trying, I mean, I would have, if I could, I think you can always get one if you play suboptimally.
Correct.
Right? But if I'm trying, I might not get a monster. And because of the way you get the monster as you go up in tech, if
These
Z
are
gets,
Guardians, by the way, we're talking about.
Guardians, yes.
yeah, monsters. If Z gets the first one and he's ahead of me, there's a good chance he'll get all of them.
Yeah, he could if he keeps pushing that. Yeah.
And that just bugs me a bit because there's no branching paths. I'm like, oh, you got the giant hippo, I'm going to take the mummy.
Right.
No, you got all of them. That might bug some people. Some people say I don't care about having big monsters. I do. I like having them.
And you definitely can win without them.
That's what
we're not saying.
Sure, it's more of a I just want those juicy good things. It's a lot of the game.
It's a big pushing. It's a big sort of selling point when you look at this Kickstarter. They're like, and look at this giant crocodile, and these hippos are wearing crocodiles, and this mummy, ooh, and the thing. You're like, okay, great. You're selling me like what I'm looking at. You're selling me that like 80% of this game is raw, and it's not. It's like 10% of the game.
But as a counterpoint to what you're saying on a design level, I think it's better that the Guardians are not that powerful because, like Tom said, you can have this feeling of, look, I just didn't get one of these, and now I've got no chance in this game.
I get that.
But that's very much not true.
Yeah,
I just rather everyone be able to get one.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
No, I get that 100%. Yeah.
The game's entirely symmetrical besides that. You have your god power, that's all different, but then you have to get those guardians to make yourself different than the other players in other ways. And if you don't get one, it's like, I definitely feel that. And I mean, this is the first one where you didn't get to add in a ton of the monsters in the game. Like you have a lot of stuff that's just sitting outside of the game for the game. That'll add to replayability and stuff like that, but you don't have an opportunity to get a ton of monsters like you would in, say, other games.
And if you do have the core game only, if you just buy this retail, there's not that many, really.
Gotcha.
There's 2 level 1s, 2 level 2s, 2 level 3s. You always play with one of the 2. That's it. So not really a lot there. But again, maybe it's a perception thing. It looked like the monsters were going to be a bigger part of the entire picture. Sure. They're not. That's all. The monsters, the Guardians.
All right, it's time to talk about the most controversial thing in this game.
Here we go.
Which is the merge rule. So I'm sure you explained it in the overview.
Now, I will say, actually, in the overview, I did not explain it much because I said I knew we were talking about it here.
Well, here's the basic concept of this. In a 3+ player game, in most of the scenarios, I think one, it doesn't happen, but in most of the scenarios, at a certain point, the last place and the second last player merge together. They essentially get the point value of the lower ranked god.
They move down.
Then they become 1. They each get 1 action on their turn, but it can be the same action, and they work together in battles. But they kind of everything goes together, but you don't get like double forces. It just kind of goes down to 1.
Yeah.
The main thing they have double is they have double god power.
Right. The lower player removes all of their monuments and figures from the board. So yeah, you're not getting more figures. You're just getting more power.
I mean, you are essentially, I think, eliminating the last player.
Correct.
All of their monuments, all of their forces, all of their anything. They get to salvage their god power and their guardians.
Correct.
Which we said again is usually a small thing.
And followers.
They might have
combine
one.
followers.
And then they join and give those things to the player who was right above them, the next player up. But that player gains god power any Guardians if you had, but loses devotion, victory
Yes.
points.
And one
to
action
match
a
them.
turn.
And they get one action a turn, and the other player gets one action a turn. Yeah, that's basically it.
I had heard about this rule in the ether, and I didn't thought much about it. I didn't know much about Ankh going into it at all.
Right.
And Mike mentioned a merge, and I was like, okay. So he read the rules to us, and on the spot, I was angry. It hadn't even happened.
Ever since I was reading, you're like, I hate that. I hate that.
Yeah, just-
I hate that.
It's
Yeah.
terrifying.
So this is pre-merge,
playing. Yeah.
before playing. I just disliked it on the spot. And in fact, I noticed a lot of threads where people talk about how they're not liking it. People say, well, it's because it's new. It goes against what gamers understand and so on and so forth. And I get that. I'm just saying my initial impressions, I was like, roar. Now that we've gone through it, I still hate it. I hate it from every perspective. I haven't been the last player. That's Mike. But if I was the last player, you're effectively out of the game. You're just kind of on the coattails. I would really hate it to be the third player because
sure.
you go
In a four-player
down.
game, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the other player go down.
4-player game, right?
And I don't like it as the leader because it was an interesting multiplayer game where essentially one player is now pulled out, changing the dynamic of all over the place stuff, and possibly they could be more powerful. I know they nerfed that a bit.
Right.
It just to me is and I have not played this as a 3-player game, but it sounds like in a 3-player game I would want to flip the board.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I'm with you. I don't like the merge. I don't like it. I get the sense, and I have nothing to back this up, but I am going to put it out there because this is how I felt. That this was a thematic decision that was made early in the design. Because it is a cool thematic idea, right?
Right.
Of two, right before monotheism, all the polytheistic gods, and you did have merging, in the Egyptian mythology, right?
Right.
Neat idea thematically. I just don't think it's fun. I just fundamentally don't think it's fun. I don't know. I just wonder if through the playtesting process, was there overwhelming positive response to this where they're like, yeah, we're going to keep this in.
Well, some people do like it for
Maybe,
sure.
but my sneaking suspicion is that most people probably are not a huge fan of it because, like you said, if you're in last place, it makes you feel like an anchor and you're really just there for show. If you're the second to last place, you feel like a lot of what you've worked for has been taken away from you now.
Right.
And like you said, if you're in first place, now you feel like the whole game has changed and it's like, well, now what am I focusing on?
It almost feels like at that point, like depending on the situation, I mean, it could be really close and it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
But if the two are like, if someone drags like the fourth person drags the fourth person way down with their score,
Right.
it's like they're essentially eliminated before the last round or whatever.
Right.
So it makes it really hard to like catch back up, and that makes it an interesting dynamic with the whole thing. Like there was a lot of anxiety. I keep saying anxiety when I'm
Right.
talking about this game, but there's a lot of that in it. With it's like,
Right.
man, I really don't want to be there. It's like, do I need to help that person? There's that whole dynamic of like, should I help that person, try to raise them up? And then
Right.
there's this whole weird table talk of like, am I
that
gonna
I
be
don't
last?
like either. I saw
Yeah.
on the internet
Am I
people
gonna be
say,
last? Am I
No.
gonna be there? And then you start playing the game in a completely different way where you're trying to lose battles on purpose just to try to
Yeah,
push
but
the
Z
person
and I were
up that
talking
you're
about
gonna
this, and
merge
that's
with.
potentially
It's
problematic.
really strange.
That's potentially
Yeah,
problematic.
the scores might change if I choose to,
Right.
as the third player, the one who might be merged and moved downward. If I choose to if I choose to just say, okay, fine, we're gonna get together and merge, fine. So I'll prepare for that by attempting to bring you up. That's really hard to do.
It is.
There isn't like a card I play that says I give up 2 of my points and
Right.
you get 2 of them. There's no such thing. But also, if I'm within striking distance of the next player,
Right.
then I should just try to win. So I'd have to be doing really badly to give up on simply doing as best as I can, because it might change. It happens all the time.
Right.
it's also not thematic.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be like, I'm gonna lose to you
Right.
so because we're about to merge anyway.
Right.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense.
No.
I think if you, again, I've wrestled with the idea of what this is meant to be and represent. I think thinking of the game not as a race to win, but as the passage of time. The sands of time are running, and you are attempting to keep yourself relevant. You are trying to not be forgotten. You buy into all that theme. It helps alleviate the sting a little bit, okay? Of, I am still relevant. We are now a new entity. We are a renewed god.
Right.
We will still stay relevant for longer. It helps, okay? A little. But I agree that mechanically and what it actually gives you, yeah, it feels a little iffy. And it also is not the kind of thing that if you attempt to change it, you destroy the game.
That's
You can ignore it. Some scenarios do. So mechanically, it almost seems like something you attach, bolt that on. It works fine, but should it maybe have been optional? It seems like there's a lot of feedback out there that is saying, "Woof, we don't like this."
Right.
So I wonder if, I wonder what happened there. Why couldn't it have been made, strongly suggested?
Especially in a 3-player game.
Right.
Variant you can play without.
sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, one thing we didn't talk a lot about, because it hasn't happened in any game I think that anyone's
Player
played,
elimination.
is that you can literally be eliminated in the
Yes.
game. But since you know that, you're like, I don't want to be, I'll get out of it.
Right.
But to me, you do that, fine. It's there just to, again, I think it's more of a warning than anything else.
Sure, for
But then the merge is pseudo player elimination anyway.
Feels like it, yeah.
It's an
kind of-
in-between. Yeah,
It's
it's
kind of
sort
like
of an
when you
in-between.
diplomacy. I'm like, I'm still alive, but I'm just kind of watching.
Yeah. It's an audacious design idea. It's a clever idea. I'm sure that it was something like, oh, this is so cool. I just don't think it's fun.
Right.
And the fact that it's absolutely unnecessary mechanically feels like you're right. Make it a variant. Make it a mode if you want to.
I want to play without it. I haven't because I don't want to, play the game the way it's not meant to be played. But I don't think I would even notice it really.
Yeah. Well, actually,
We're
you
going
did. You
to
play
talk
it
about
without
that
it
in
once.
one second. Let me say
Yeah.
one more thing. I don't even care or mind that much. Is it fun, the merge? I don't think it's that fun, okay? But fine, leave it in. I'll tell you what I dislike. Having to deal with the other player who just merged with me for every choice.
Right.
Yeah.
That I don't like. I only get one action on my turn, and Roy gets the other one. Great.
Oh, that would never happen.
Till we get to combat, and that's super annoying.
Right.
Should I play this card? No.
How about this
this one?
card?
No.
What do you think? Oh, you're sitting across the table. Let me get up and go to you.
Right.
What do you think we should play? This.
It's like forced
How about that?
alliances, basically.
That's talk about throwing a giant monkey wrench in the game that was clipping along nicely. If we could each have keep our hand of cards, and just do the fight, I don't know how, but this is your fight. This is my fight. Great.
Right.
I think it would be a lot smoother.
Right.
I take my action. I don't worry about you. You take your action. You don't worry about me.
Right.
It's that constant. Do what you want to do.
Right.
What do we do? I really don't like
Yeah.
that.
It changes the whole tenor of the game 3/4 of the way through it.
It does.
All right, before we drop the final thoughts, we need to talk about player count.
Yes.
That matters here because we were talking about the merge. The merge does not exist, as we found, in a 2-player game because, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So you played a 2-player. We played
I've
a
played
2-player.
several times 2 players. Yes.
I've not played it with 3, and I'm still nervous. I don't want to play it with 3 with the merge. But anyway, the 2-player game feels very different. What did you think about that?
It's fantastic. I think the 2-player game is very chess-like, incredibly thinky, to the point that my only negative to a 2-player game is that it might have some analysis paralysis. You
Right.
need to be careful. But I find it to be very engaging. Lots of that angst you've been talking about.
Sure.
Everything you are giving up, you are giving to your one opponent. There is no merge, so none of that hitting a giant pothole 3/4 of the way through the game. The resolution order feels incredibly important towards the end of the game. Yeah, I mean, I really like it at 2. I clearly prefer this game at 2 players, okay?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a fantastic 2-player game, and I think, of the trilogy, this is the best. You can't even play
Right,
Rising Sun
exactly.
at
Sure.
2, but this is a viable 2-player game, and there are not many games like this that work this well at 2. I think that's one of the big
Actually, of this
positives of this.
series, even if you throw in Godfather, whatever,
Sure.
this is clearly the best at 2, if the only one I would play at 2.
Correct.
Yeah, you can technically play Blood Rage at 2, but this
I
is
don't love
a
the Blood
really
Rage
great
2.
2-player game.
It really is. Yeah.
All right, well, let's find out. Roy, what do you think? Final thoughts and rating.
Okay, for me, I really enjoy a lot of things about the game. I of course, love the other games in the series, so I really enjoy having monsters and things, and the gigantic god miniatures are amazing. I love the card combat. For me, this is actually going to be a 9. I like it a whole lot. I think it's a really fun game. I feel like I rate the other games in the series maybe, I know I rate Blood Rage higher than this, and Rising Sun is probably better than Rising Sun for me, but I really enjoy the way the game works, and I'm really excited to play even more with some of the expansion stuff and everything thrown in together. So for me, it's going to be a 9.
All right, Mike?
I like a lot of the aspects of this game. I feel like my favorite part of it, honestly, is how easy this is to teach and learn. It is actually a very streamlined rule set. In some ways, this is going to sound ridiculous, and I know I use this comparison too much, but it almost feels like a Knizia. It's like, here are your 4 actions. You can explain each of those 4 actions in about 20 seconds. It's really simple, right? Now, the devil's in the details, and there's a lot of moving parts, but I really like how streamlined the actual core elements of the game are. And it actually plays pretty quickly, too, which are another thing that I like about it. The merge is really tough for me because it is a key element to the game. And I can't just consider the game without that, because they've made that a core mechanism of the game. Player elimination and the merge are core elements of the game. They're in there. And so with that in mind, I'm giving this an 8. I think it would have been higher without the merge, because it does have a lot of the clever aspects that I liked of Rising Sun. It has some of the dynamism, if that's the correct word, of Blood Rage, but I think it loses some of the kind of like stand-up moments that I get at Blood Rage. So to me, it's a little bit below that. I know everyone wants us to compare the games in the
I'll compare them, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So this is probably, to me, right now, in between Blood Rage, a little below Blood Rage, a little higher than Rising Sun. Could change. I've only played this, maybe 4 times, I don't remember. But yeah.
Well, I'm right there with Mike. It would have been a 9.
Yeah.
But it has to be an 8 for me.
Yeah.
Because the merge, almost a 7 actually. if I'm, and here's the thing, because I know that we're going to disagree on this a little bit. You like the 2-player game best.
Yes,
I think the 2-player game is great. It really is. But I like these multiplayers.
Right.
I like that combat. I like that. But that merge hangs over my head like a cloud, and I'm just bothered by it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be third.
That means you don't have to merge.
It's
Yeah,
still
but
in the game,
even
though.
first player, I don't like the merge. Anyway. And I also don't like that I can't have those cool monsters. But I like it a lot still. I think it's easily the most streamlined and the fastest of the 3 games.
It's really quick.
It's still my 3rd favorite. But I like the monsters. I like the god powers. I'm glad I got all the extra gods, because I'm like, whoa. I can just switch them in and out, and it's so easy. It's plug and play.
Yeah.
You know, it's really cool. But yeah, it's that bugs me just a little bit, and I think some people will actively hate it for that, while other people will laud it. And who knows, this might even show up on our most innovative games of the year because of that. I don't know.
Right.
But we'll find out then.
It's funny, because I'm rating it the same thing you're both rating it. I'm giving it an 8.
Oh, I thought I left you for last because I thought you'd be the highest.
No,
No,
Roy's the highest,
I love it.
I figured Roy would
but
be
it's
an
my
9.
favorite of the 3.
Yeah, that's because you're a hater.
I also I checked even.
Yeah.
I was like, this is my favorite. I wonder what I rate Blood Rage. An 8.
Okay.
It's the same.
Sure.
Okay. So this just like barely edges out Blood Rage, and then Rising Sun is below that. But with a bunch of caveats, you know what I mean? It's like, I'd rather play with 2. I'd rather play the scenario where we don't merge. You know, and no one's really talked about the scenarios too much.
Correct.
It does come with this book of scenarios. Very nice stuff.
Yeah.
They've got 1 scenario online already. Turns the game on its head. Amazing. Amazing stuff.
Yeah.
So it gets tons of props for that. But yes, I prefer it with 2 players. And yes, the monster thing is underwhelming.
What would you rate it at just 2? If it was only a 2-player game, would it be a 9?
I don't know. Maybe. Like, if nothing else existed?
Yeah. No, I'm serious.
I don't know. A lot. Yeah, I really like it.
Okay.
I mean, if it only, in my head, I guess, somehow existed as a 2-player game, maybe a 9.5. I mean, it's an amazing 2-player game. I think it is incredibly captivating as a 2-player game. But I know all this other stuff exists. And every scenario I look at, almost, I go and I'm like, map for 2 players, great. And the 3 and the 4 and the 5 players. Okay, there's a bunch of stuff I'm not using, probably ever, because I want to play it at 2. I'll try the merge if I play with more people, but I have a sneaking suspicion the variants online are going to fly.
Right.
There might even be some official ones. I'm just going to put that out there because
Sure.
I feel like that's coming.
Without
I feel like
merge,
they're
you mean?
probably going to do that too.
Yes.
There's already a
I'm going to
scenario
play
in there.
I wanted to wait till after the review.
Sure.
I want to play a merge game. I want to play a multiplayer without merge. I think that could change my rating for sure.
It just vanish into the background and not bother anything.
Forget it. No merge exists.
Yeah, if you get eliminated, you just get eliminated.
Right. Like I said, there is a scenario in the book, a multiplayer scenario that removes the merge.
Right.
Right?
For 3 players only, but yes.
Oh, was it? Oh, I thought it was
I
a
think
3
it was
to
a
5.
3-player map.
but
I
could
don't
be.
remember, but
Can't
yes.
remember. All right.
All right, well, there you go. That is a long review on Ankh. We'll be, some of us will be taking a look at the different content and stuff for it as the weeks go by. But until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Z Garcia.
I'm Roy Canning.
I'm Mike DeLisio.
Have fun ruling and not being forgotten.